Welcome to Marnie Reed Presents Connect to Develop, where we provide insight from healthcare leaders on the hottest topics and trends.
Hello, and welcome to an incredible lineup of guests who we have today with us to discuss the evolution of orthopedic practice in the last decade. We are honored to have Dr. Cynthia Emory, Chair of the Department of Orthopedic Surgery and Rehabilitation at Wake Forest University School of Medicine and Executive Director of the Musculoskeletal Service Line at Atrium Health Wake Forest Baptist. We have Peter Gold, hip and knee surgeon at Panorama Orthopedics, a large private practice with a private equity partner. And last but absolutely not least, Dr. Amy Trammel, hand surgeon at Atrium in Charlotte, North Carolina. Hi, folks.
Hey, everybody.
Good evening.
Thanks for having us, Marnie.
All right, Cynthia, can we start with some historic perspective? And no, I am not calling you old, but when you began your journey into becoming a surgeon, what did you think your practice and life would look like?
Well, I appreciate from being the historic perspective, which, yes, absolutely does mean that I'm the oldest person on the call this evening. But when I first started into practice, I began in an academic health system at Wake Forest University School of Medicine. And really, my only focus was patient care, getting good at being a surgeon, understanding what it was like being on the other side of training and working with residents from an education standpoint. I really didn't have any exposure to anything that was operations or administratively based. So I thought I was going to be getting really busy as a surgeon and then doing some teaching with the residents and medical students.
Oh, if you only knew then what you are doing now. Peter, you've been in practice for 3 years. While interviewing with the group that you landed at, you knew they were looking into strategic partnerships and they landed on signing up with a private equity backed partner. In your interviews, did you ever step back and think, wow, when I got into medical school, I had no clue I'd be interviewing for healthcare jobs as a practicing surgeon with a practice where a huge investment company was going to be a major partner in the practice and have some say?
That's a really good point, Marnie. I think for me, my father is a pediatric ophthalmologist, and he actually started his own private practice with his cousin now about 40 years ago, and he grew that private practice. And so for me, I always knew that I wanted to not only practice medicine, but be involved as an owner of a business and do everything I can, to grow the business and to make it be a great place for people to work and a great place to take care of patients. So having that ownership was always important to me. And it's unbelievable how the healthcare world has changed. And now having these large partners, really gives a lot of opportunity, for our practices to grow and to partner with other practices and give best practices, across the country with other owners of private groups. So I definitely did not imagine it, but it's a great opportunity.
I have to ask because ophthalmology was one of the first into the PE realm. Did he give you any tips going in? Do you and him sit and kind of spitball about business ideas or, being a junior owner versus what happens when you become a full partner?
No, for my dad and I mean, we connect about taking care of patients. The reason why I went into medicine is because he came home every day with a smile on his face and really proud of what he did. And so, him and I kind of stick more towards the clinical stuff than the business side. But, again, it's a great opportunity that we have here in medicine. And I think if done well and done by the right people, there certainly can be some advantages.
Very cool. Amy, some context for our listeners. You're an employed surgeon in a large health system. You recently submitted for part two, and you're building a practice in a large community. And on top of the stress that this brings, you're also in a digital era where patients come in with a lot of information and probably a lot of ideas about their diagnosis and next steps for care. These patients also have the ability to write reviews about anything as innocuous as how they were, maybe greeted at the front desk to the artwork or the color of the walls in your clinic. Can you talk about the pressures of building a practice in today's healthcare setting and some more of the tenured surgeons who trained you? Maybe those pressures didn't exist back then.
Yeah, it is a lot. So you're right. I am employed through a hospital system, a very large hospital system. And coming into that, there's some great resources because the hospital's behind you. So you have a lot of automatic referrals and things like that. But it's also hard because the whole idea, I think, of you're the doctor and so you're in charge and like maybe for example you're in charge of your MA or who that is. A lot of times, if you work for a large hospital system, you're kind of not the person hiring or helping decide who your help is. I got super lucky, but you're right. I think you mentioned patient reviews. A lot of the stuff we get reviewed on, if you work for a hospital system, you have very little control over that. So I've been lucky, and I work for a hospital system that values our patients and their care. So they're also invested in being sure that my patients are happy. But the control aspect, I was really surprised just isn't there. That being said, a lot of hospital systems, I think if they do their research, are really good about hiring surgeons when there's enough patient volume. And my hospital system for sure did their research on that. So building a practice sometimes is a little bit easier if you get hired by a hospital because at least, they have controls of a lot of the referrals and there's processes in place. That being said, I was the first hand surgeon hired by my hospital in my area. And so, the well-oiled machine of like, this is the block time you have, and then these are the therapists that know your protocols or that, have the stuff in place. That's not really there if you're the first hire. So I think it a little bit depends on either being hired like as part of a group where you're one of multiple surgeons, or if you're the only one, which is how I was. That was definitely new for me. But yeah, overall, as you said, I'm still kind of learning my way around stuff, but the business side of it definitely unique in this digital era.
I would have to think that being able to build a service line kind of from the ground up has its hard challenges, right? There's no patient care pathways, there's no people that are just used to your service line, your setup. However, you probably don't also hear a lot of, well, that's not how it's done here. So that has to be a win, right?
Yes, for sure. There was no like shoes to fill. I was coming in and everyone was like, "Oh, this is a hand surgeon," like they had no idea. And I was like, "Oh yeah, no, this is how all the hand surgeons do it." So that was a good thing for me coming into it. I could just be like, "No, no, no. This is how it's done. Don't worry about it. Every hand surgeon does it like this." They didn't have anything to compare it to.
You probably also look like a rock star coming in with a 15 to 20-minute case after some of those complex hips or those multi-level spine constructs get done.
Yeah, but I think they know that mine's just not as big of a surgery, but
Cynthia, you've trained dozens of residents and you've seen them go off to build their own practices. What's been the best part of watching the evolution happening in healthcare and how it affects your trainees?
I think residents are becoming much more aware of how to prepare for what the next step is in their career path. And so much of your training is, oh, I just have to get into medical school. I just have to get into residency. I just have to get a fellowship. And then when they get into practice, they're not as well prepared. But now I think residents are much like the word is out, and residents are asking really good questions about practice models. And when they're negotiating for jobs, they're asking those really important questions that I didn't know to ask 15 years ago or 20 years ago. So it's been fun watching the knowledge expand beyond just orthopedic surgery, how to care for patients, how to do operations. Residents and fellows are much more business savvy, and they're also more adept at adopting new technology. And I think that's been an area that's really been fun to watch as healthcare has evolved and we've gotten better at providing care for patients.
So, is the converse side to that, what is the hardest to watch is when they then get employed by you, they ask you really hard questions during that negotiation, and then they want an expensive robot? Or what's the hardest part of watching that?
Yeah, so it's a little bit of overusing that strength. And so, as you know, one of the things that I do is I help teach residents and fellows prepare for practice. And we're recruiting several different surgeons now. And over the past few months, I've had the same conversation with many of them about what are the things that you have to have, what are the things that are nice to have, and what are the things that really maybe aren't that important to you. And they have to write them down. And so the hard part is now that we have people that are really well prepared, helping them with the negotiation process of it's not going to be everything. And so that part is a little bit hard to watch. I think the other piece too that's been a little bit challenging is the competition and the inflation and the salary increases, where we now have people coming out of training who are able to land jobs with really high salaries, no call expectations, or really high salaries and no weekend obligations. And so that part's been a little bit challenging of the commitment to patient care versus the boundaries that now a lot of people are establishing for really like my time is done. I'm going to go home and it's somebody else's issue to deal with. That part's been a little bit hard to reconcile.
That makes sense. Peter and Amy, as you get closer and closer, as you got closer and closer to going out and interviewing for jobs, you had the benefit of your senior residents or fellows that were training there coming back from their interviews and shedding light on what's available out there. So, were you excited about heading out on your own, or did you have any trepidations based on their feedback?
That's a great question. I think I was really excited to get out into practice. We all trained for so long and have been so diligent in learning as much as we can. But the fact of the matter is, as much as you try to make your attendings patients your patients, they're still never really your patients. So I was really excited to get out there, to have my own patients, and then to really take care of people the way that I would want to be taken care of. And so that's what excited me the most. And I was really happy just to get out there and start to take care of people, which is what we spend our whole entire lives learning how to do in our own special ways. And so, yeah, I was really excited to get out there and start.
I was also really excited. I do think Dr. Emory brought up a good point earlier that when through the journey of becoming a doctor and then a surgeon, I was one of those med students who, you're in med school and you're just trying to get an orthopedic residency, and then you're in orthopedic residency and you're just trying to get a good fellowship. And, that whole progression of your career up to that point, you're just trying to get a spot and you're trying to show your worth. And you're kind of recruiting the program like, hey, don't you want me? And then all of a sudden, it like flips overnight. Now you're the commodity that other people want. And that was very strange to me. It wasn't something that, anyone kind of prepared me for. And then all of a sudden, all these recruiters are reaching out. They're very interested. And, if you want to come to that region, or say, I did want to be in the Southeast, but maybe not that hospital. And then the recruiter's trying to match you up with someone else. And it was a complete flip of what it had been as a college student trying to get into med school, and then med student trying to get into residency, and so on. So that part was exciting. But, once you have the opportunity, then there's all this pressure of trying to get the right job. And, everyone changes, or I think there's a statistic that like 50% of orthopedic surgeons will change their jobs in the first 2 or 3 years of practice, something like that. So you don't want to get it wrong. And there's a lot of parts you don't understand. So, yes, to answer the question, I was very excited, also very nervous, but it's turned out great for me so far.
So I want to unpack that a little, because the statistic is actually that 50% of physicians, so not surgeons, and in fact, orthopedic specifically has a higher incidence of sticking with jobs for longer than that 2 years. But for Peter as well, is that really something? I mean, are you afraid that you'll have to restart over and you'll lose connectivity with those patients if you have to go outside of, per se, a non-compete area? Or is it of failure because surgeons are not programmed to fail? What is it that is so daunting about that statistic?
Yeah, look, I think all of us spend so much time getting to this point, and when we're finally here at the quote unquote finish line and also starting line at the same time, like I think the inkling for us is we want to stay on this racetrack and not get off. And so, if you're lucky enough to join a practice, academic or private, or any setup, and you enjoy your partners, you get the things that you feel like the resources you need to take care of patients the way you want to take care of. I don't think any of us want to change, right? We're naturally committing ourselves to one job for the rest of our lives, right? And so we're going to have one profession. We're kind of naturally, I think we move towards wanting to find a place that we like, build that community, build those resources, and take care of people. I just think it's just not in our nature to want to constantly be changing. When we look at some of my other friends who are not in medicine, it's so common for them to change jobs every couple of years, and they're always looking. And it's just, in medicine, I think it's different. I think for us, it's less of a job, it's more of a career. And when you have a career, you want to start it and continue to grow it in the same practice if you can.
Cynthia, you've built a thriving practice and a national name for yourself amongst your peers. And then, much like you did not believe or think that you would, you took on several leadership roles in your health system and became one of the youngest women to be appointed an orthopedic department chair. So, how does this leadership role that you have now differ now than when your mentor took that on over a decade ago?
The role of a department chair historically was very academic. It was about how many grants you had, what your national reputation was, a lot with recruitment, and that still holds true. I think as health systems have evolved and schools of medicine have integrated with hospital systems and hospital systems join with other hospital systems to create these sort of mega health systems, the role of a chair has also had to evolve with that. And many department chairs are responsible for the business and finance of their department, in addition to the more traditional academic functions of promotion and research and education. So I think that's probably been one of the biggest differences. I kind of hold both roles as department chair as well as the director of the service line for our market. And so I'm responsible for all of those things. So I think that's what really has changed the most. And the amount of growth is really tremendous. We are always recruiting. And for any of you that have heard me talk before, I will often sort of make a joke about that I'm always recruiting, but it really is true. The amount of growth that our system has had, it's almost too difficult to keep up with, that we're always looking for more joint surgeons and hand surgeons and foot and ankle surgeons and everybody as our population continues to grow and as we continue to expand different sites of service. And so that piece, being able to develop relationships with people, not only those coming out of fellowship, but also people who are perhaps in a mid-career and at an inflection point where they're ready for a change. They're ready for a leadership role of their own that maybe they don't see at their current position. It's not that they're unhappy in their practice, but maybe they're feeling like, is this all that my life is going to be for the next 30 years? And so I think developing that skill and being able to have those conversations is something that's really evolved over time.
Okay, folks, you heard it here. So if you're applying for a job, you can find Cynthia at the Wake Forest Atrium, Winston-Salem location. So, with how business is going and the ever-growing consolidation and things coming in like the Amazons and the CVSs getting involved in healthcare, do you think the role of chair at some point will require stepping back completely from your clinical practice?
But my why I went into medicine was to help take care of patients. And so as long as I can provide the care that my patients, I may not see as many patients anymore, but as long as I can still be there for my patients when they need me to be there for them, and I'm still maintaining my skills in the operating room and still taking call, I think a lot of that makes a difference with the street credibility and the respect that you have from your partners and from the faculty whom you lead. If I'm not doing patient care and I'm not taking call and I'm not waiting for a case on a Friday night to go like everybody else, I think it's difficult to sort of be seen as an orthopedic surgeon and instead become, quote, one of them. And that's not really what I want to be able to do. I want to be able to have that good relationship with my partners and understand the real challenges that most of the surgeons are facing. So I'd like to be able to maintain my clinical practice, but I think that across the country, there are models where the department chair is primarily overseeing the academic functions of research and education. And then there's a different leader who's responsible for the operations side and the business side of things.
That makes sense. I'd love to address this to all three of you, but let's go ahead and start with Peter. What are 2 to 3 lessons learned on building a practice in a private practice that's taken on a strategic partner, because we're seeing more and more of that, that you'd like to share with your colleagues across the country?
Always kind of have that one guiding filter of when you make a decision on how you want your team to run, and you make a decision on how you're going to build a protocol for your patients, just have that filter of, is this how I would want to be taken care of? Is this how I want to take care of my patients? And if that answer is yes, then move forward with it. And if it's not, you got to find a different way. And I think if your practice can be in line with how you want to be as a caregiver, then every time and every day you come to work, you're going to have fun, and there's going to be lots of ways for you to innovate and continue to raise the bar on how we can take care of our patients.
Beautifully said. Okay, Amy, how about you?
I think one of the most important things that I learned was the value we bring to a system and how to utilize that to get equipment or staff that you need. And so when I first showed up, I would say, whatever's on the shelf, that's what I'll use. I'm not going to ask for anything. And I think that's really important to, get your foot in the door. But there's some certain things that I guess, at least as a hand surgeon, I can give examples of that really did make my day different. So, a hand table that would slide onto a stretcher sounds like no big deal, but that is a huge deal. And it helps with turnover time and it helps me help more patients through the day, which in turn makes the hospital happy. Instead of anesthesia having to move the patient from their stretcher to the OR bed and then back to the stretcher, all this stuff that probably saves about 15 minutes of OR time. And that really matters to a hospital system. So simply asking for something like that makes a big difference. And realizing that I could. Similar to that, also getting occupational therapist. Again, this is specific for a hand surgeon. But when I started, I was a hand surgeon with no occupational therapist. And that is crazy. But I didn't know I could ask. And then once I asked, they helped me with that. And it has made a huge difference for my patients. And then even using some occupational therapists outside of, my own hospital system, now that I have personal relationships with those, they text me to let me know how my patients are doing. And that in turn is great for the patients. So I would say asking for what I need, and then also just developing the professional and personal relations with people that I work with, specifically the emergency department. That is completely opposite of what we would do as residents, right? You never want to go down to the ED. It is the worst. Oh my gosh, a consult. I got to go down there. Ugh. But now I love it when they reach out to me because then I can help. They'll, let me know a flexor tendon is coming in. I can find a spot for them in clinic. I can look at my OR time and help plan for that. It helps me so I'm not operating super late at night, and it helps the patient because I want them to be seen early. The emergency department has my cell phone number and they text me, and it is so helpful for me to set up my day the next day or the next week. If you're a joint surgeon, probably don't care to let the ED have your number, but specifically for hand surgeon that does a lot of trauma, it's been super helpful. So developing those personal relationships has been really good.
Amy, to your point, for joint surgeons, whether it's the ED or not, one thing of starting practice is starting to build your network of other physicians in the community, whether it's neurologists, pulmonologists, cardiologists, primary care doctors, right? You're starting to build a network of other physicians that have your cell phone number that you can work together on your patients with. And that's certainly something that's really, really important in building practice as well. So that's a good point.
Would not be surprised if Cynthia was teeing up recruiting emails for the both of you while you were speaking. Okay, we will round it off with our chair and fearless leader, Cynthia. What are some, for the people out there aspiring to take on leadership roles, not the chair level per se, but just take that next step into a leadership position? What are 2 to 3 best practices or advice that you could give to them?
This is something that I actually get asked a fair amount, and it applies to lots of different things. So many health systems are integrating, and before you know it, you realize like, oh, there's a whole nother hospital that's joined our system, or there's another practice that's joined our group. A couple of things that I've learned over the past few years as we've gone through different phases of integration, really back to back, is understanding what integration really means and understanding the importance of different people's roles. So one hospital may be set up one way, a practice may be set up a different way. And it doesn't mean that one is right, wrong, or better. It just means that it's different. And so I think approaching things from a place of curiosity instead of from a place of, well, why are they here? Are they trying to make me like them? And just really trying to understand where they're coming from, what their perspectives are, what their concerns are. I've learned that many people who have administrative roles that are non-clinicians, the title really matters. And many of us as surgeons, we just want to get the work done, right? It doesn't really matter what a particular title is. We want to take care of patients, we want to solve problems, we want to get the work done. But really understanding what the structure and the organizational chart looks like does make a difference as you're trying to build those relationships, because you also want to make sure that you have those allies and people in the new practice, the new market, the new hospital, wherever it is, somebody that you can reach out to so that you can start building those relationships and develop a rapport. And how you do it may not be what's best. And so I would encourage people to start small and identify something that's a common goal as you're trying to build those relationships. Don't try to boil the ocean and solve world hunger on your first attempt of doing something together. Pick something small that's feasible, that's meaningful to both groups, and then achieve something together. And that's how you build that relationship of trust and that foundation and how you can grow, and then maybe start to tackle some of the stickier stuff that comes down the road.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, it has been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm sure our listeners got a ton of great tips.
Thanks for the invitation.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Marty.
Yeah, thanks so much, Marty. Appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to Connect to Develop. You can find more interviews and Marnie's Minutes on my YouTube channel at Marnie Reed Presents.